The hum of mission control echoed with the soft clatter of keyboards and the distant murmur of overlapping voices. Monitors displayed endless streams of data, blueprints, and live feeds from orbit. At the center of it all stood Commander Elias Grant. His eyes locked on the largest screen in the room, the live feed of the Battlestar under construction. His grizzled features, marked by years of service, were unreadable, but his presence commanded respect from everyone in the room. "Status update," he said, his voice sharp, cutting through the low buzz of the room. "Core stabilization at 87%, replied lead engineer Rachel Voss, her eyes never leaving the holographic projection of the ship's core. Her fingers danced across her console, bringing up thermal readouts and structural integrity reports. "No anomalies so far. All key systems are green." "Good," Grant replied, nodding once. He shifted his gaze to the far end of the room, where a younger man in a suit paced with nervous energy. Councilman Darius Kroll, Earth's liaison to the International Defense Initiative, was not a man of patience. His crisp, tailored suit looked out of place in the gritty war room atmosphere of Sol Command. "This is madness," Kroll muttered, his voice barely a whisper but loud enough for Grant to hear. "Billions of credits. Decades of R&D crammed into months. If this fails, we're finished." Grant turned his head slowly, his eyes like steel. "If we don't build it, we're finished anyway." Kroll opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. He knew Grant was right. Everyone did. The signal they had intercepted 5 years ago had left no room for doubt. It wasn't a random broadcast. It was a message meant for someone else. But humanity had been listening. Hostile fleet en route. Secure all outposts. Extermination protocols active. The message had been short, but it had been enough. Humanity wasn't alone, and worse, they weren't safe. Panic had gripped the world in those first months, but it didn't last. Humanity had always been at its most dangerous when pushed to the edge. Nations that had bickered for centuries suddenly found themselves on the same side of the line. Rivalries were put aside. Defense budgets skyrocketed. The brightest minds were called in, and their task was simple but monumental: build something that could survive what was coming. The result was the Battlestar, Earth's first and only line of defense against an enemy no one had ever seen. It wasn't sleek like the ships from old science fiction dreams. It was ugly, brutal, and raw. Armor plating was layered like the scales of a beast, its weapons bristled from every angle, and its core was an experimental hybrid fusion reactor they hadn't even finished testing. But it worked. Or at least it had to. "Commander," Voss called, her voice tense. "We're about to fire up the main conduits. If anything's going to go wrong, it'll be now." "Do it," Grant said firmly. "No delays." Voss's fingers hovered over the activation key for a moment, her breath steady, her eyes locked in focus. With a sharp exhale, she tapped the key. For a moment nothing happened. The hum of the room continued, the quiet beeps of monitoring equipment blending into the background. Then a low, guttural thrum echoed through every channel. It started soft but grew steadily louder, like a great beast awakening. The central holographic display flickered, and arcs of blue energy danced along the contours of the Battlestar's core. "Power output stable," Voss announced, though her eyes remained locked on the readout. "Core at 40%, 50%, 70%. Her voice grew more confident with each report. Suddenly, warning lights flashed across several consoles. "We're picking up an energy spike," one of the technicians called out. "Unregistered source. Could be feedback from the reactor." "No," Voss snapped, shaking her head. "That's not feedback. It's external." She glanced at Grant, her face pale but her eyes sharp. "We're being scanned." The room went silent. Everyone stopped. No one needed an explanation. Scanning meant observation. Observation meant someone was watching them. "Do we have eyes on the source?" Grant asked calmly, though his hand gripped the edge of the console like a vice. "Negative," replied a technician. "Nothing on radar, lidar, or passive sensors. Whatever's scanning us, It's not using conventional methods. Of course it isn't, muttered Kroll, wiping sweat from his brow. It's them. It has to be them. No proof of that, Grant replied, but he didn't sound convinced. His eyes shifted to Voss. Can you mask our emissions? Not entirely, she said, her fingers racing across her console. But I can flood local space with noise. They'll see static, nothing more. Do it, Grant ordered. Moments later, a pulse of signal-jamming noise shot from the Battlestar, disrupting every known scanning frequency. Voss's eyes scanned the readouts, her heart pounding in her chest. Please work. Please work. External scan terminated. A technician reported with relief. No sign of reinitiation. The tension eased, but only slightly. Everyone knew it was temporary. If they were being scanned, that meant someone out there had seen the Battlestar. And if they had seen it, they would come. We just painted a target on ourselves, Kroll hissed, his voice low but venomous. They know we're here now. Good, Grant replied, his eyes sharp with defiance. Let them come. The room went quiet again. No one argued. Deep down, every person in that room knew that this was how it had to be. They weren't building the Battlestar to hide. They were building it to stand. Commander, Voss said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady now. She sounded like someone who had made her peace with the task ahead. Primary core is stable at 100%. All systems operational. We're ready. Then get the weapons online, Grant said. They've had their turn to watch. Now they'll see. The words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge to the stars themselves. Voss nodded, tapping a series of commands into her console. Moments later, a cascade of lights lit up across the Battlestar. Railgun arrays, missile silos, and directed energy turrets powered on, their systems humming with quiet menace. On the central display, a simple status indicator flashed. Weapons ready. Upload the contingency protocols to the command AI, Grant said. His eyes never left the display of the Battlestar, watching every flicker of energy, every slight adjustment of its thrusters. If they breach Earth's orbit, I want it ready to act. Voss glanced at him, her fingers still on the controls. Commander, are you sure? If we upload those protocols, there's no taking them back. I'm sure, Grant replied, his face hard as stone. We didn't build this thing to negotiate. There was no ceremony to it. No speeches. No proclamations. Just the sharp press of a key, a brief flash of confirmation, and then silence. But everyone in that room knew the weight of what had just happened. In orbit, the Battlestar's lights pulsed once, then settled into a steady glow, like the slow, even breathing of a beast in slumber. For now it would sleep. But if the watchers from the stars dared approach, it would awaken. And when it did, nothing in the universe would stop it. The council chamber buzzed with tension as the high conclave of Xyloran convened. Holographic displays hovered in mid-air, each filled with tactical reports, energy signatures, and a detailed wireframe of the human Battlestar. Counselor Vrenix, known for his strict adherence to protocol, raised a limb to signal for quiet. The chamber's noise dimmed to a low hum. This development cannot be ignored, Vrenix declared, his voice resonating with authority. Humanity has crossed the line from observation to threat designation. They have constructed a warship capable of fleet-level engagement. Their weapon arrays are active. Their energy containment is flawless. This is not the work of a species still learning to wield fire. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. Xyloran species prided themselves on their predictive models, their ability to foresee the natural development of primitive worlds. Humanity, however, had shattered those models repeatedly. No one had expected them to achieve fusion so quickly, let alone master containment. No one had expected them to send signals to the stars. And no one had expected this. Counselor Merva leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the holographic display. And what of their message? We see you. Arrogance. Bluff. Or do they genuinely possess the means to breach our cloak? Her gaze shifted toward Commander Zorvesh, who stood at the edge of the chamber, silent but watchful. It was not a bluff, Zorvash replied, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. They knew. Not by chance. Not by luck. Their actions were deliberate. Their gaze was fixed precisely on our position. We are no longer unseen. Silence followed. The implications were undeniable. Every empire, no matter how vast, relied on the power of invisibility, the ability to see without being seen. If the humans could see them, then every covert strategy, every preemptive tactic, every unseen hand in the galaxy's affairs would be at risk. Then it is settled, Vrenix said firmly. We must deploy a preemptive strike. A fleet should be mobilized and— No, Zorvash interrupted, stepping forward. His eyes met Vrenix's directly, unflinching. A strike will not achieve victory. It will guarantee escalation. Escalation is inevitable, Vrenix retorted, his eyes narrowing with disbelief. They are builders of war machines now. You know this as well as I. Every cycle we wait is another cycle for them to grow stronger. By the time we act, they will have fleets. If we provoke them, Zorvash replied, his voice unwavering. If we force their hand, they will turn all their focus on us. They are not like the others we have broken. They will not splinter. They will unite. His gaze moved from counselor to counselor, his presence commanding the room. I've seen it. They do not break under pressure. They harden. A pause lingered in the air as the council absorbed his words. They all knew the truth of it. Humanity had not fractured when they intercepted the galactic signal. They had not fallen to fear. They had turned it into resolve. A trait like that was far more dangerous than mere technological progress. Counselor Merva leaned back in her seat, her gaze thoughtful but calculating. If we do not strike, what do you propose? Shall we simply watch as they build more of these monstrosities? She gestured to the hologram of the Battlestar, its menacing silhouette casting long shadows over the chamber. Shall we hope that they forget they ever saw us? Zorvash's eyes narrowed. Oh. We ensure they never need to see us again. His words drew confused glances from several counselors. Vrenix tilted his head, a sharp click of irritation echoing from his mandibles. You speak in riddles, Commander. Say plainly what you mean. I mean we change our approach, Zorvash said, his tone firm but controlled. We have studied them as primitives, treating them as animals awaiting classification. But animals react. Predators anticipate. If we continue to act as observers, we will lose. We must instead act as shadows. The chamber grew quiet again. No one interrupted. No one dared. We do not engage them directly, Zorvash continued. We infiltrate. We sow disarray, not destruction. Disinformation. Misdirection. Make them question their own advancements. If they cannot trust their own vision, they will see threats where there are none. We erode them from within, quietly, methodically. Counselor Merva's eyes lit with understanding. You propose a subversion protocol. Yes, Zorvash said. Send no fleet. Deploy no warships. Instead we send them whispers. We turn their victories into doubts. The message "we see you" was meant for us, but it can be reversed. We see them now. We ensure they never know when it is true. Vrenix's claws tapped the arm of his seat rhythmically, a telltale sign that he was weighing the logic. Subversion requires time, he said finally. Time they will use to build more of these weapons. If we fail, we hand them the galaxy on a silver platter. If we strike them, we hand them something far worse, Zorvash replied, stepping closer. His voice grew lower, colder, every syllable spoken with precision. If we strike, we turn them into us. We make them the threat the galaxy will rally behind. We make them the unstoppable force. A murmur of agreement rippled through the council. Counselor Merva's gaze lingered on Zorvash, her eyes sharp with appraisal. You have seen this before, haven't you? She asked quietly. I have, Zorvash admitted. I saw it on Trelos 9, when we crushed the Arcanes' revolt. We broke them with fleets, with fire, with total dominance. His eyes darkened with memory. But it was the survivors we should have feared. The survivors taught the next generation. The next generation became unbreakable. Vrenix fell silent. The counselors exchanged glances, their limbs shifting in quiet contemplation. None of them had been there for Trelos 9. None of them had seen what Zorvash had seen. They had only read the reports that had failed to capture the truth of what it meant to crush a species so thoroughly that they learned to become something worse. "It is decided," Merva said, her voice sharp with finality. She turned her gaze to Vrenix, daring him to challenge her. "We adopt the subversion protocol. We become the shadows. No fleet deployments. No overt actions." Her eyes shifted to Zorvash, her gaze colder but more respectful now. "But understand this, Commander. If you are wrong, if this fails, there will be no more debate. The Council will not risk it twice." "I understand," Zorvash replied, his eyes unwavering. "Then it is done," Merva declared. Council adjourned. One by one, the counselors deactivated their displays. The chamber dimmed, the blue glow of holograms fading to darkness. The faint hum of power conduits filled the void of silence. Zorvash remained in place for a moment longer, his eyes still fixed on the hologram of the Battlestar. The image lingered in his mind like a shadow that refused to dissipate. He knew the Council believed in control. Control of information. Control of narratives. But Zorvash had spent too many cycles in the field to believe in control. He believed in leverage. As the chamber lights dimmed, Zorvash spoke softly to himself, words meant for no one but the dark. "They see us," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the distant stars. "But now we see them too."